Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome back. We have had a very special morning with three different presentations that truly answered the main question of our event. What can Spiritism do for you? This block is made up of two presentations, followed by Q&A with all speakers. Don't forget to send in your question in the chat area. Our next guest speaker is a very special friend from the Andre Lewis Tampa Spiritist Society, where his efforts and contributions are aligned with the children and youth Spiritist education. He is also a contributing member of the Spiritist Federation of Florida Children's and Youth Committee. Vitor Eugenio will present the topic Choose Love Over Suffering. Choose Wisely. Welcome, Vitor.
Hey guys, hey Joanna, hi everybody.
Hi, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure. All right, so now just share this, right? Okay. Give me 1 second. Share. Okay. Can you guys see it? Can you see it over there?
No,
Not yet.
it shows you and myself for now.
Try something. Oh, sorry. Give me 1 second. I have a problem sharing. Okay. One moment. There we go. Okay, let's try one more time. Share. Boom. 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 Okay. How about now? Yeah?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so let me put this presentation mode here. All right. So everybody can hear me, right? Okay. All right, guys. So first of all, good afternoon to all of you. Thank you for taking the time, to be with us here this afternoon. I also want to thank you, the Florida Spiritist Federation, for the opportunity to share some words with you about, something that these days we always struggle with, right? I mean, suffering. I mean, why we go through things and why is this necessary? And then the question, right? I mean, why choose love over suffering, right? And why you have to choose it wisely. So I hope to be able to give you guys, some definitions of what suffering is and how can we use that in our favor by choosing love and, living, happier lives and always thinking of ourselves as immortal spirits, seeking relative perfection. So, without further ado, I just want to start with some basic concepts. And the first one is, why do we suffer? So, usually, plain and simple, suffering is a response from an action um, that we execute. And suffering, it is something of the world that we live in. So it is fair to say that suffering, it is something that we all gonna go through. That's just plain and simple. And we all know about the law of action reaction. So for every action, there is a reaction, and that goes for good and for bad. And usually, when we do bad actions, we receive bad reactions, and that's why we suffer. So that can happen in many situations, and that can happen with different nuances, right? So there is no right and wrong because all of us are different, but we go through similar situations through life in where we can kind of get situations that happen with the same people and kind of analyze it and trying to get a better outcome out of this. So um, that saying, why we suffer, this is essentially for our own good, so then we can grow. And again, we're gonna go over the fact that if suffering is necessary or not, and when why is that. But please keep in mind that the world that we're living now, right? expiations, and we have all those trials, and moving on to a world where has been regenerated, right? Suffering is a part of the process that everybody's going through. So, in an essence, suffering is something that we're gonna have to deal with. In other words, until we are able to choose not to suffer. And I hope just to share with you guys some ideas on how to do that. So that leads us to the question: is suffering really necessary? So, short answer is that it's yes. Okay. So again, I mentioned that we live in a world that is transitioning, right? And a lot of things are happening. So suffering can happen in two ways, right? So you can either suffer because of something that happened in a past life, and you have to readjust in the life that you're living now. So this one, we essentially don't have any option on not to suffer, right? But we can take some steps to suffer less, right? And that's something that we're going to talk about here a little bit. And the other type of suffering is the one that we inflict within ourselves, right? And that's the most common. And some say that a great majority of the suffering that we go through in this world through our various existences um, were types of suffering that was self-inflicted. And then that comes to the question, I mean, why am I choosing to suffer, right? And that's a very interesting question. And is that something that, only us can answer that for ourselves? Because suffering is individual and unique. We can go through the same situations together, but we're going to have different outcomes. Some people will suffer more, some people will suffer less, and some people are not going to suffer at all. That's just depends, of your background, on how evolved you are, and how willing you are to deal with a situation that might cause suffering. So one might argue that, okay, why would God let their children or their creation suffer, right? Um, and some would say, well, God, if God's all love and mercy, God should prevent people to suffer. But then, if we didn't suffer, if we didn't go through situations to learn on how to deal with a lot of things that happen in our lives, I mean, what would be the point to be spirits that were created unique and ignorant, right? Because that's what, when the spirits are created, that's the true characteristics that they have, right? We get all the divine laws implanted in our essence, but when the spirit is created, it doesn't have any life experiences. It hasn't had interactions with anyone. It hasn't done anything. And that's the beauty of the creation, is the fact that we are all unique and we all have the same chances and the same opportunities, to achieve um, better paths. And God does that in an act of love, because God, being an image of a father that teaches, is going to let its children go through situations by themselves so they can learn. So that's essentially my view as far as why God let us suffer. And it's not in a bad way by any means, because sometimes suffering has such a bad connotation. It's such a bad word, such a heavy word. But if you take suffering and you change that by saying, I'm not suffering, I'm learning something, that can change completely your perspective on the situation. Because we all know that we, the creation and everything in the universe, um, it is the divine laws, they drive us to do things, they control how everything works. And the fact that suffering comes in place, and just like any other emotion, is to kind of give a red flag that you, me, and other people that are suffering, we're going through the wrong path. We are kind of steering away from what we need to be. So it's essentially an alarm that says, well, if you're suffering, there is something you have to address, right? And each one of you might have, different examples to go through it. But in most cases, when we get out of a situation where we are suffering, there's always a lesson. And we look back and we say, I didn't know that at the time, but that situation taught me what I needed to know, and now I'm better. And that's the beauty of suffering. And I know it might sound funny to put suffering and beauty at this in the same sentence, but when you take suffering as an opportunity to learn something that you did wrong, or to understand a situation that you were not aware of, that's where the beauty comes in, the opportunity for us to do something for ourselves and succeed. And one thing that I want to point out is there is no such a thing as, suffering forever. So suffering, it is really a state of our minds in the situation, right? Obviously, there are cases of people that are suffering all the time, all day, every day. But most of us, we go through phases we are not suffering. We have situations where it happens, right? So that's what we need to take into account to see, okay, suffering is just a pointed situation. So it's not something I have to go through every day, right? And that's where the choice comes into place, because it is really important to us to understand that when we are not suffering because of something we did in a past life and that needs reparation, everything else depends on our attitudes and our choices, to either to suffer or not. And sometimes what we just need to do is just silence for a moment and look within ourselves and try to understand the situation and figure out why this is happening. Because it's very easy to play the victim, right? And to say, oh, I don't know what this is happening to me. But if you stop for a minute and you meditate and you truly try to understand what's happening, you might find what's going on and you will understand why that situation is happening to you. And that itself is really liberating, right? I mean, who can argue that when you are suffering about something and then you finally realize why that's happening, that starts your healing process. So, knowing yourself and trying to figure out the situation for what it is really a step forward in taking that lesson and then obviously taking the actions to resolve that, and then eventually fixing it. And that's just going to become a memory, something that you learn. Um, so, again, God's love and his justice, and he'll never be unfair with any of us in a situation, right? So sometimes in our moments of anger, of disbelief, we would just go ahead and point to the sky and blame God. Why this is happening to me? Why are you so mean to me? Blah, 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 right? But all in all, if you look at it, it is an opportunity for us, as spirits, to learn and to grow. And I think if you take that approach or that view instead of suffering itself, it helps to ease, how negative this the suffering as a word, it has. So that leads us to another question: is suffering optional? Yes. And that's the good news about it. Because, again, the great majority of the issues and the suffering that we have in our lives, in one way or the other, we inflicted that upon ourselves, right? So if you have a child at home and that child is giving you trouble, and you decide not to address that when you have to, eventually that child's going to become a teenager that's going to give you some grievances and probably an adult. And then you're going to suffer for that. But that's something that you could have avoided, obviously, with the limits, because we know that, parents, they have limits on how their kids absorb things, because the kids are their own spirits and they make their own choices. But at the same time, there are things that we could have done to ease that, so then you don't look back and regret, oh, I should have done this, right? And I mean, I'm sure that you guys have a lot of other examples on how you looked into a situation, or the situation has passed, and sometimes things resolve by itself without you putting a lot of effort. And then you look back and you're like, oh my God, why did I went through all this? I mean, why did I, all those sleepless nights, and why did I get angry, and why did I cry, and why did I do that? Because of this situation. And then in the end, everything was resolved, and you look back, I'm like, what a waste of energy. But let's not think that way. It was not a waste of energy. It was because nothing goes to waste, essentially. Can you imagine that if you haven't gone through that situation and had to deal with your emotions, you would never have an opportunity to deal with that in the future? I'm sure once we learn things, the take that we have about things in the future is different. Because if I learn how to deal with a situation where my emotions were like over on the edge, next time that happens, maybe I'll let my emotions take less of me, right? And sometimes, guys, the same situation repeats itself over and over and over. And that's a sign that it's, would say, is a test to make sure that we understand what we have to do. So, what I want you guys to grasp the concept is, when you realize that suffering is optional, that gives you so much power to address the things that are going on in your life, right? And that's liberating, because if you think about things that are optional, you have a choice, yes or no. I want to suffer, yes or no. And if you chose not to, that gives you tremendous power, to achieve things, and just to strive. So don't let anyone tell you that you're suffering because you deserve it, or you're suffering because that's how things need to be. Sometimes they do, but take your time and reflect, look within yourself, try to understand the situation, and take the situation at its face value. Because sometimes we just try to fantasize things, but take the situations as they are and see, what can I do to change this, and then take the steps to change it. There are situations where there is nothing you can do, and that's when you have the little talk with God and say, there is nothing I can do here. I really need your help. Please send help. And help is going to be given. But I really want you guys to understand and internalize the fact that suffering is optional in the majority of the time, and then you have control to make the changes that you need to take control. And now, and another thing I want to mention that just came to mind is that um, sometimes we have to humble ourselves to go through, a situation which causes pain and suffering. And humbling ourselves and being vulnerable sometimes in society is seen as a sign of weakness, and is really not. Because if you keep trying to do things your own way, being that wall that no one can get through, the only thing you're gonna get is hits over and over and over and over, until the point that you get tired, and then you have no strength, to do anything else. But then when we look at the situation, and what I like to say to the teenagers and the kids that I collaborate with, um, in the groups, is that try to take um, the approach where you are here to learn, and we are here to learn, not just because we're kids, teenagers, and adults. Because when you look in situations like, oh, I don't know how to do this, I need some help, or I have never done this before, it is a different ball game when you humble yourself and then you understand that you are here to learn. That kind of takes the pressure out of your shoulders of having control of everything all the time and having to fix everything. So being humble, it's not a weakness, it's actually a strength. So that's another, something that I want to um, provide to you guys, and hope that information helps. But just make sure that every time that you humble yourself and you look up and say, God, I don't understand what's going on, please help me out. Help is gonna come, and that's for sure. So now that we talked about, what is suffering, it is really necessary, we figured out is optional. How do we do this, right? So how do we go through moments that we are suffering, and how do we learn and grow from all this? And the answer is simple: is just to choose love, and to always choose love. But why to choose love? Well, mainly because love is a driving force of the universe, right? So everything that you look into, there is love behind it. Um, and everything with love is easier. I mean, I challenge anyone to tell me that they had a bad outcome suffering other than using love, because all love is always the best way to go. Sometimes it's not the easiest one, because sometimes loving is hard, but again, we are here to learn. And choosing love is choosing ourselves, right? Because Jesus says, um, love yourself, then love your neighbor. And by the fact that we're loving ourselves, we're giving us the opportunity to understand ourselves, prepare ourselves, and then being tolerant, patient, and be forgiven with everything that we do. So then we are more open to have more perspective and look into things differently. So every time that we choose love, we are aligned with the divine laws. And as I mentioned before, when we're suffering, we're going away from the divine laws. So then going back to love, we are gonna be sure that we are going through the straight path. And being aligned with the divine laws is a challenge itself, as we all know, because we're always spiritists and we all know how hard it is to be a spiritist sometimes. um, but it's worth it, right? Because that makes us stronger. And looking back, we always have a record of achievement, and that's really good to know, because give us more energy to move forward. I mean, I guess you guys, we have a very difficult and challenging year last year, but everybody can look back and see how much they grow, right? They grew actually, right? And that's a good thing. And choosing love, you're always going to give you that opportunity to look back and see, the good things that happen. Um, but again, choosing love sometimes it is the way, but sometimes it's not easy. But choosing love, the chances of you diminishing, the level of suffering in your life, it really helps out. Um, like, can you imagine, like, looking back at the past, situation you have, and then having to do that in the future again, but now knowing how to behave? That sounds like a good deal to me, right? At least I know I'm going to be more straightforward and put my energy in the stuff that really matters, right? So again, what I wanted to leave you guys here today is the fact that suffering's here, it's real, it happens, uh, and the good news is we can choose to suffer or not to suffer, or to suffer less. um, and that's with love, loving ourselves, and then that spreads to other people. And always having faith that anytime that we need help, we just have to ask, and that will be given to us. um, Choosing love is staying on the path and learning all the time. And again, it's not going to be easy, there's going to be a few stones here and there, But it is the path to go, and that's what Jesus asked us when he came and he said for us to follow him, right? And that's to follow his teachings, and that's something that we have to do it every day and becomes a habit, and it only has benefits to us. So I know this was kind of quick, but I wanted just to give you guys, some perspective, give you guys some definitions on what suffering is, and how the Spiritist doctrine sees this. But I hope that I was able to give you guys, a message of hope that nothing that's bad lasts forever, and applying love, even though the smallest things, it makes a big difference in our lives. So I'd like to leave you guys with that, and thank you again, the Spirits Federation of Florida, for the opportunity. And I think now we go to a Q&A, I believe.
Uh,
So let me know.
Thank you, Vitor. Not yet. We still have another talk. And then, so thank you for your sharing all the knowledge. So don't forget to continue to send questions for our Q&A. Our next and final speaker of our day is Marcelo Netto. Marcelo is the co-founder of the Conscious Living Spiritist Group of North Miami. He is also president of the Spiritist Federation of Florida. His topic is Building Blocks for a Meaningful Life. Welcome, Marcelo.
Thank you very much, Janaína. Thank you so much. It's a true pleasure to be here. Thank you. Okay, our topic today, building blocks for a meaningful life. And I was paying attention to all the lectures that came before us. It's really interesting the way that they approach all the topics, and it's a true moment for us to reflect in our existence. What does it mean to have a meaningful life? What gives meaning to our life? This is a question that I am placing here. Like a sense of purpose, significance to our own existence. This is a question that we constantly ask ourselves. It's a profound question, and perhaps one we would like to have like many hours to discuss this. Maybe this is like a lifetime question. And some people will say, in order to have a meaningful life, that in order for us to be have meaning, a meaningful life, to be successful, we might say like, well, okay, I want to be rich, I want to be like powerful, I want to be an actor, a model. So this is what leads us to be a happy person, a successful person. This is something that I constantly ask myself. So in the eyes of the world, success means winning, for example, in business, in the professions, projecting our personality, one's personality, receiving applause, receiving honors, all instances of very, very brief duration. But according to the Spiritist teachings, the Spiritism, success means victory over oneself and one's own primitive passions. Joanna de Angelis, the spirit author of many books through the mediumship of Divaldo Pereira Franco, will state that quite often no one pays attention to someone whose life takes on a spiritual, everlasting, meaningful turn. On the other hand, when success is external, it makes a big bang, and it causes the individual to be concerned about maintaining his or her status, drawing attention and attracting the spotlight of fame. So today we see more and more people being concerned, being preoccupied with having as opposed to being. So the successful person in the conventional sense, it's not necessarily happy. However, people anxiously pursue conventional success on the earth, thinking that is what gives their life meaning, with immediate goals in mind and an overload of draining emotions. We know many stories about that. To achieve and maintain, for example, external success and seek meaning to their lives, we sometimes suffer terrible aggravations. So the way to the top, this top that we consider to be the ultimate goal of human being, sometimes is plagued with enormous dissatisfactions. We see declare and undeclare wars. We see competition. We see hatred taking place. We all know the stories. The social media is all full of that stories. So at once at the top, baseless fear, we see intrigue, we see ambition are employed many times to preserve that conquered spot. But on the other hand, success over oneself increases harmony, increases joy in the individual, who becomes selfless candidate to contribute in favor of a happier and much more balanced society. So life takes on a different, whole new meaning. When we observe the Spiritist teachings, we start to ponder about these things, and certain questions, I would say, like forcibly led us to think about our own lives. Think about it, about the choices we make, about our future existence, and even our spiritual progress. So Spiritism arrived answering many of these questions. And I think the biggest of these questions is the biggest of these questions. Where am I headed? Where am I headed? If we don't care much about that answer, it wouldn't matter much. We're going to be ending up just like the cartoon that we pretty much all of us knows, Alice in the Wonderland, talking to the cat. When the cat says, "Where are you going?" And she answered like, "I don't know." So it doesn't matter which road you take. It doesn't matter. But we do care. We do care. So much so that current afflictions and challenges are so profound that one will state, let's go to the slide, there has got to be a meaningful reason behind all of this, and challenges, sacrifices, painful situations, learning curveballs, etc. You can name it, will certainly get us there. Viktor Frankl, I would like to bring this guy because it was mentioned in many religious groups about someone that he achieved victory over himself. Viktor Frankl, he's a world-renowned author of the book Man's Search for Meaning, provided us a key of understanding life. And he stated, we need to stop asking about the meaning of life and instead to think of ourselves as those who were being questioned by life daily and hourly. Our answer must consist not in talk and meditation, but in right action and right conduct. Life ultimately means taking the responsibility to find the right answer to its problems and to fulfill the tasks which it constantly sets for each individual. There's another slide, another saying that he stated, life is never made unbearable by circumstances, but only by lack of meaning and purpose. This is a very profound sayings about this, where we find in his book the building blocks for a meaningful life would have to do with that, which give us purpose, which structures our lives in accordance with the immortal spirit's true needs and noble aspirations. Okay, I know you may say, okay, Marcelo, sure, but he is Viktor Frankl, and I am John Doe, whatever name you guys have. He is Viktor Frankl, the Superman, not the Superman, I'm exaggerating just to make some kind of sense in this. Indeed, I know he is a Viktor Frankl, and he's a quite unique man, I know, but yet there's a reason his life took a new meaning. Finding himself in the midst of one of the most painful situations our humanity has ever encountered, he was able to say, look at that, pay attention. If there's meaning in life at all, there must be meaning in suffering. Let's pay attention to what he says, and you will see a similarity in the gospel of Jesus. And you're gonna find in the chapter 5 of the gospel according to Spiritism, blessed are the afflicted. When the saying in the book of the gospel of Matthew on chapter 5, blessed are they who weep, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are they who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are they who suffer persecution because of righteousness, for the kingdom of heaven is theirs. There's a meaningful reason because of we suffer. And if we go reading this wonderful book, The Gospel According to Spiritism, we will see in the justice of affliction of the same chapter, item 2, exactly what we are mentioning and what Viktor Frankl stated in his book. The compensations that Jesus promises to the afflicted of the earth cannot occur except in future lives. I'm saying like future life could be like years ahead, but could be happening in the next life. Because without certainty about the future, these maxims would be nonsense. And even more, as we see in that item, they would be a falsehood. But even with the certainty, the spirits will state, it is difficult to understand the usefulness of suffering in order to be happy. Many of us says like, okay, it's because we want to achieve a greater merit. But then must say like, but why some suffer more than others? Why? Why are some born into poverty, others into opulence, without having done anything in this lifetime to justify such position? Why does nothing ever work for some, while everything seems to smile on others? This is something that we pay attention. And I'm not going to read the whole thing. I'm not going to say the whole thing. I'm inviting you to go over the chapter 5 of the Gospel According to Spiritism and read the chapter. Many of us will find exactly the answers, because the paradigm, the materialistic paradigm of facing life, will lead us to desperation and will lead us to a lack of purpose in life. This is when we stop. This is when we listen and learn, and when we observe and try to apply in our own daily lives. But since we are talking about our own individual journey to find the blocks with which to build a meaningful life, we bring back the teachings from the benevolent spirits in the book, The Gospel According to Spiritism, when we are left with a drawing in how we may get there. The moral person. Chapter 17. Be perfect. And while we will not have time to bring the entire portion of this chapter, we invite you to dive deep at home and consider reflecting upon this item in its entirety. Truly moral persons are those who practice the law of justice, love, and charity in its greatest purity. Sure, we cannot yet do this. I understand. But we are able to question our own conscience about our actions, and if we are truly doing all the good that we can while in this present life. The golden rule that we all know very much about it find its way into this reflection, for it is one understood by all of us that treating others accordingly what we wish to be treated is the golden rule for the relationships in this world. And if we go to extract another portion of the moral person, they have faith in God. We have to have faith in God and in God's goodness, in God's justice, in God's wisdom. This is a very big build block, for it basically allows us to understand that nothing happens without God's permission. So we are naturally inclined to submit to the divine will in everything. But let's go over this moral person. They have faith in the future. Faith in the future. Thus, they place spiritual possessions above temporal ones, transitory things that we give so much value. Perhaps many do not consider this to be one of the building blocks, but faith in light of Spiritism takes on a whole new meaning, for it allows all of us to understand life more awakened, more aware, and willing to be led by it blindly. This is something that make us to think about. Let's go over the moral person. They know that all the vicissitudes of life, all its sorrows, all its disappointments are trials or expiations, and they accept them without complaining. This means like being empowered with the knowledge surrounding the previous and present causes of affliction, allows the journeying immortal spirit to appreciate life differently. And sure, I know we may still complain a little bit, but we no longer become consumed by despair or disencouragement. Persons, another portion of this moral man, the moral person imbued with the sentiment of charity and love for their neighbor, do the good for its own sake without expecting anything in return. Anything in return. We find our satisfaction in the benefits that we spread around. We find service when we render, the happiness that we promote, the tears that we can dry, the consolations that we can provide to the afflicted. And we see this exchange of energy, because when it is in giving that we receive, It is in pardoning that we are pardoned. It is in consoling others that we receive this divine consolation that actually comes from above. Moral persons are kind, are humane, are benevolent toward all, regardless of race or creed, because they regard all people as brothers and sisters. The many comings and goings of life by means of reincarnation allows the spirit to develop this moral sense and regard one another as brothers and sisters in humanity, developing compassion, developing understanding, and even a sense of belonging. Let's keep going. Following Jesus' example, they forgive and forget offenses and remember only good deeds because they know that they will be forgiven according to how they themselves have forgiven. This allows us to become indulgent towards the weakness that we all have because we all need indulgence. And let's remember the words of Christ. Let him who is without sin cast the first stone. Ooh, my God, when we say that, put us in our right place to be a forgiven person. And finally, we end up studying our own imperfections and strive incessantly to combat them. All our efforts are focused of being able to say to ourselves tomorrow that we are better than we were yesterday. I know it's a long road to be traveled. I know that. But let us take heed and remember Joanna de Angelis' teachings about our own limitations. And I'm going to put in the book, Wake Up and Be Happy, when she says, initial limitations. Let me read it with the slide. Initial limitations and difficulties become useful experiences for future and more significant undertaking. Upon discovering life's purpose and restricted happiness, individuals emerge from their smallest and overcome every obstacle like a tender little plant breaks through the coat of the seed where it cloisters itself to grow toward the sun that vitalizes it. This divine tropism lifts them toward the goal and strengthens them throughout the different growing stages, the different growings of stages, until they reach the much coveted moment of plenitude. It does not matter what evolutionary mechanisms take place to evolve. That's what is important. And these are the reflections that we would like to bring to you. And pay attention to our actions. I am doing this very appetizers about like building blocks for the meaningful life, so we can understand that every circumstances of our lives has a purpose, has a meaning, and the purpose and the meaning is to evolve, is to progress, but ultimately is to learn how to love. Because when we love, we are being fulfilled by the divine providence. The ones who love are the happier in the face of the earth. Don't deserve, don't ask to be loved. I know we are in the stage asking to be loved, but be the one who love. This is the happier person, the happier man, the happier woman, and we will see a connection with the divine providence and the good spirits will inspire us constantly. Thank you so much for this opportunity for sharing this very brief topic, and let's keep watching. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Marcelo. So, our friends, we're just organizing here. It's going to take about 1 minute. So, we're gathering all the questions and we will have all the speakers together on the screen. And so we're so happy so far. We've had 5 talks. Every single person brought, a very good point of view and perspective. And Spiritism, that's, what's the beauty of it? Is it that we can talk to about a topic and open, the like a fan, and we have so many options to help ourselves. And so just bear with me for another moment, and I'm still gathering my questions here. I hope everybody's enjoying so far, and we are going to have another series of talks in July and August. So stay tuned. It's gonna be one. The next one will be in July in Orlando with the Plenitude Spiritist Society, and then in August it's gonna be with the Conscious Living from Miami. And once we have everybody ready, we'll have them on the screen. Hello, everyone.
Hi.
Hello, how are you? Good.
So nice to see everybody together and seeing Claudia and Marcelo. So that's really nice. Okay, so we do have some questions here. We're kind of going to go from one to the other, not necessarily following, like the speakers that spoke first. So, but we would like to ask, okay, let me see here. So we're going to ask Claudia actually is going to be the first one to answer. So we have a very interesting question here. What does it mean to be in charge when I am going through the experiences of yesterday in this present life? Can I change the past?
Very interesting question. And what comes to my mind is the words of Chico Xavier. We cannot change the past, but we can start a new future. And we cannot change the past. It's already gone. However, if we start today making changes to who we are, making changes to how can we act better, right? Then we're going to have a better future. If we think about it, we don't know what we have done in the past. Unless it's an action that we have done presently in these moments, we cannot remember from the past. But we know our imperfections, or some of them at least. We know our vices and our passions. So what can we do to work on them? How can we do better? And from that on, we start making a new future. If we learn with love, as we mentioned in our lecture, in our study, if we start working on ourselves and work with love, then we definitely will have a better future.
Thank you. Thank you for, this beautiful answer. Okay, so next question will be to Christopher. Saint Augustine recommends to judge ourselves in the question 919. How to find a middle ground between judging ourselves, between not judging ourselves at all, or judging ourselves too hard?
Okay, thank you for the question. It's a really difficult task for most of the people, right? Not judging ourselves at all is the basic reason for why we're going through so much confusion, so much misunderstanding in this world. And judging us too hard is exactly what Joanna De Angelis mentioned in some of her books, that sometimes we create a harder situation by judging ourselves too hard. I believe that the middle ground is when you identify that you have to look at yourself honestly and identify all the points that needs to be changed. And if you have difficulty accepting those points, you just look to other people around you and apply that same concept, if it were them to be analyzed, how would you react if it was someone else that you are judging? And in turn, you look at yourself and honestly find the necessary points to be changed. So the middle ground is very necessary because it creates the balance that we need. We cannot be too complicit and we cannot be too hard. We have to be just right on point.
Thank you. That's a very good point. I think we all ask ourselves, this question. All right. So next one will be Vitor. How to choose no suffering when so many challenges happens to us?
What I would say is just take it step by step, right? List all your challenges, see which ones are the easiest to overcome first, and work your list up. Because I do understand that we live in a world with, so many things distracting us from what really matters. But I would say, just take a pragmatic approach to your challenges and just try to get them off your list one by one, from the easiest to the most complicated.
All right. Thank you. Okay, so next question will be to Marcelo. If faith, if faith a building block that can be, okay, let me restart over. Sorry, guys. If faith a building block that can be used for a meaningful life, I guess is faith a building block that can be used for a meaningful life? If so, can I develop it if it lacks in my life?
Oh, absolutely, yes. But we're not talking about the blind faith. The blind faith sometimes lead us to moments in life where many circumstances drag us to a very materialistic point, a way of looking at life. That's why maybe you will see in chapter 19 of the Gospel according to Spiritism. It's a whole chapter dedicated to faith, and it brings exactly this question about like faith can be developed, of course, can be developed, and everything is based on the beliefs that there's a supreme being. It's not even a being because, properly speaking, God is not a being. There's a supreme intelligence. There's like he's the cause of all things. The first cause of all things is supremely good and just. And if he's supremely good and just, everything that he has created since the beginning of times is destined to be perfect. It's relatively perfect. It's destined to be happy. What does it mean? So we are a working process. We are evolving. We are going to develop this faith. And once developing this faith in the Almighty, we will see that maybe we are not experiencing this happiness that we wish to be happening right now, but it's a process that's taking place. Be trustful in the divine providence. I know it sometimes seems to be like you don't understand, you don't know my life, you don't know where I'm going through, what kind of challenges I'm going through. But wait a little bit. Try to do good. What Victor says, like go step by step and try to do good. Once you do good, the reactions that we are going proportion, the proportionality of the reactions, the reaction of the causes that you're promoting are going to achieve you, are going to find you, and then this faith are going to be developed, increase little by little. My suggestion is for this person to read about the chapter 19 of the Gospel according to Spiritism. It's the whole chapter dedicated to faith.
Thank you, Marcelo. Yeah, that's a really great chapter. So next question is for Sandra. How to leave behind our loved ones if most of the time it is not planned for them to live with us?
Well, I'm not sure if not planned to live with us. I think the most we have to accept that we have a certain time to be in this life, and we're not always going to be with the people we love the time we want. So we take the most of the time we have to them, because that's our aspect of impermanence and temporariness that we have in life. So we need always to be aware that the time we have here with the loved ones are precious, and we have to take the most of time we can and say that we love them and do the best we can to be together at this time in this life. Not sure if I answered the question.
Well, I think all together, we get all the information. It comes together as a puzzle. I think that's, what today is about. It's like a puzzle. Every person brings up, an aspect and, together makes the whole picture. So thank you, Sandra.
You're very
Okay,
welcome.
next question is for Claudia. Is action and reaction the same as karma?
Okay, so I'm glad that I received this question right after the person made the question, because I would be like, oh my God, it is. Because we hear a lot about this word karma, right? And I was not sure, is karma as by where it came from the same thing? But then I was remembering from the book that I spoke today, Action and Reaction. I remember there was a chapter in there that talks about the word karma, and it's on the chapter 7, an invaluable discussion. And I will ask permission to read because it's really interesting. It says, yes, karma, an ordinary expression among the Hindus, in which means action in Sanskrit, actually implies cause and effect, since every action or movement is the result of previous causes or stimuli. For us, it means the account we all must pay, including all our debits and credits. There are accounts of this kind, not only listening and defining individual persons, but also peoples and races, states, and institutions. And I'm going to continue a little bit later saying, in order to better understand karma, or the account of destiny created by us, we must remember that the governor of life also has a bookkeeping system that is expressed in the techniques of inalienable justice. And they continue talking about it, but I think that kind of gave us already the information, right? That yes, has the same. I would imagine that karma coming from the Hinduism has a difference from the Spiritism, but mainly the main idea of karma is that and I like the way they put it in here, the bookkeeping system, right? The credits and the debits, because we need to remember that every time we do something good, that will annul or it reduce the amount of debts we have. Actually, Divaldo Franco wrote something about it, and I will not remember exactly what is the word, but it's every uh, every good we do annul the bads we have done. It's something like this. We would need to look into it, but definitely it is informing us that we have this bank account, both karma and action and reaction, and we will be getting hopefully credits so it can when needed to be correcting or being punished. That's the word that is in the gospel. How we will be doing it, that we're going to depend definitely a lot about the credits that we have as well.
Thank you. Great explanation. Wow. I'll have to rewatch this to fully pay attention because I'm kind of nervous here.
No, and I really invite everyone to read this book, Action and Reaction, because that's so much good information. that is just the lecture in here does not even bring a small idea of everything that the book can bring. So many examples that we can take from that will give us a very good idea how can we position ourselves in life and think about the wrongdoings that we have done and how and what we need to do better, right?
That's right. Thank you. Okay, so next question is for Christopher. The conscious is a great guide to judge our actions and thus knowing that. How can we take full advantage of our consciousness in our favor to know thyself?
Thank you for the question. It's an excellent question. I understand consciousness as the mechanism that allows us to identify and understand our actions and take ownership of it. So as we evolve intellectually and morally, we acquire more consciousness, and therefore we are able to identify our mistakes, our wrongdoings of the past, and even in the present, and take ownership of it. So in other religions, when we hear they're saying about the judgments, the judge, and will be judged, in the doctrine, the Spiritist doctrine, we understand that that judgment is done by our own conscience. So when we understand that we are unbalanced in relationship to the law, and there is a necessity of us rectifying or putting back in balance what we have caused, is our conscience that determines the next step on this quest. So our conscience is basically the mechanism that allows us to understand, to identify, and to own our own actions. And that is part of our process of planning the next life, when we are able, through our conscience and understandings, to plan accordingly, because we can only plan those things in our lives that we are able to understand and take advantage of that. Otherwise, there is no meaning of you planning something that you cannot recognize as a lesson or as an opportunity. So, to answer that question, this conscience is the mechanism that will allow us to be able to find the answers that we've been seeking since the beginning of times, that where we came from, what we are doing here, and where we are going.
Thank you so much. Okay, so next question is for Sandra.
Yes.
How do I know if I am living with more virtues than when I arrived in this present life? Help me, because that's something I need to know.
I think we all, right? According to the spirits teaching that we saw in the books of Allan Kardec, they always say that we move forward in our progress. We never go backwards. That's a very important information, because sometimes we are too harsh on ourselves and we think we're not doing good, but we are. We are always moving forward. What happened is our pace is very slow, because, the condition of our level that we are spiritually speaking, but we are always moving forward. Even within this life, I don't know at the age of the person who made this question, but I'm going to talk about myself. I can see myself different now than I was, better, a little better than I was 30 years ago. And if you can see this within this life, imagine in the next life, all the things we learned, with our mistakes. And as Christopher mentioned, the opportunity. So we have to pay attention to the opportunities that life has given and grab this opportunity and make the most of it.
All right. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay, so now we have a question that came from YouTube. I'm going to put on the screen. And this question will be for Vitor and Marcelo. So, Vitor, if you want to go first, and then Marcelo, if you can, kind of also bring some information about it.
Okay.
Oh, okay. So I guess I can't do that because I'm not the presenter. Um, I will just ask the question. Must suffering always be in direct contrast to happiness?
So in essence, suffering and happiness are two different states of mind, right? Um, but them being states means you can choose between them, right? So if you're suffering, you're not happy, and if you're happy, you're not suffering. So by definition, yes, they're diametrically opposed, but they are a choice, right? And our day by day, our attitudes, our thoughts, they are going to drive which state of mind we're going to be. And it's in our best interest to try to be in a happiness state most of the time.
Okay. Marcelo, do you want to add?
Now, I like the way that Victor approached the question, because that's right. If there's suffering and it's happening, suffering in our lives, it's got to be a meaning for this. When we have a very materialistic perspective in life, when we simply don't believe that there is like a purpose, as Viktor Frankl has mentioned, that a meaning in life, of course, I will. This probably will lead me to kill myself, to bash whatever the circumstances I'm in, and of course, let's try to maybe understand that if there is suffering in my life, it's got to be maybe a wake up call. There's, of course, there's like some certain sufferings that I cannot change, and if I cannot change, it's got to be some kind of alert to my life. Am I doing something wrong? Am I able to change the way I am suffering? And sometimes we see we're not being very humble enough to get that teaching as a lesson in our life. So we have to pay attention. Why are we suffering? Because I see when we do this fraternal assistance in our spiritual centers, we see most of the conversations that are taking place there. We see the reason of the suffering. It's something that we can simply be more humble, be more loving, be more forgiven, a more forgiven person. We can change this pattern. Of course, there's certain suffering in our lives that is related to the previous existences. And that's why the change of perspective, bringing the spiritualistic paradigm instead of the materialistic paradigm, will bring us a conclusion that there is a lesson behind this veil that we might not know now, but one day we're going to achieve, we're going to perceive, and we're going to be more, as Victor says, like, okay, it's two stages of our life. Okay, we can embrace the suffering. I'm not saying this is not a masochist proposition. Of course, no one likes to suffer. Or if there's suffering in my life, let's do all that it's possible to change this in a good way, using love, using forgiveness, using compassion, and but if there's no way for us to change, because we understand there's certain circumstances in our lives, they're very painful, and that's why I invite you again to read the chapter "Blessed are the Afflicted," chapter 5 of the Gospel according to Spiritism, and you will find a much broader answer for all these questions that are questions of ourselves. Most of the time. I don't want to do another lecture here because Victor was much more concise than me, and I am like doing like this philosophical way of doing this, answering this. But it's pretty much this. I invite you. chapter 5, Gospel according to Spiritism. Blessed are the afflicted.
Thank you. While you two were talking, I had a thought that came to my mind also. Many times when we're suffering or we're happy, there is, I guess, one bridge that can help us, which is prayer. And I can personally say this because, lately, prayer has been something that, helped me because we may be in the middle of the storm, but still be able not to suffer. And then that's when prayer and all this, comes in and helps us to be able to move on and be able to overcome, because we also know that when the suffering is high, that's when the victory is coming. So we have to be strong, and so the two answers were just beautiful. Okay, we have one last question, and that will be to Marcelo. What is the greatest virtue that can be considered a building block for a meaningful life?
Being humble. Being humble. Let's remember the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5. Blessed are the humble, they will inherit the earth. What kind of earth we would like to inherit? This earth of like being like in the top of a position of a, for example, I'm the supermodel, the super actor, the super politician, the super man of the world, conceiving this, going through the materialistic point of view. Sometimes being humble, because when we are being humble, we empty ourselves. Let's remember the phrase of Karen Armstrong. She used to be a nun. Let's dethrone ourselves from the center of the world and putting someone else there. When we dethrone ourselves from the center of the world, we're able to learn, we're able to understand, we are able to forgive, we are able to we are able to receive something, because most of the time we're full of ourselves. We know everything, I know all the answers, I'm the best of the world. But when we are humble, we empty ourselves for something else. The love of God can fulfill the empty spaces that we allowed for Him to be in. Let's inherit this earth, but it's not the earth outside, it's the earth within that needs to be conquered. And once we conquered ourselves, I'm sure we're going to be a much better person.
Thank you. Well, we're coming to an end, and I want to thank every single person who's here. Christopher from Miami, uh, Vitor from Tampa, Sandra from Deerfield, but she's actually in Brazil, and I myself am in Fort Myers, and Claudia and Marcelo in Miami also. So thank you for your participation. I'm sure that these thoughts will touch many people's hearts, and I hope that we after we end, we can share with our friends and family members, because you guys did a beautiful job. So thank you so much. And now we are going to say goodbye, and I will do the final prayer. So thank you, everyone. We hope to see you again soon.
Thank you.
Okay, so in the name of the Spiritist Federation, we would like to thank every single person who joined us, today since 11 a.m. this morning and throughout the day. And we would like to invite you to join me for our final prayer. We want also, thank Love and Wisdom for being our host, our co-host, and this way we were able to travel virtually to St. Pete and be with all of you. So at this moment, I will, close my eyes, and if you feel like you want to, you can join me. Heavenly Father, Master Jesus, today on this Sunday, we thank you for this beautiful opportunity we had so we can, using all the tools and information we gathered today, help us to apply on our daily lives. So when suffering comes our way and we need to overcome, we have the means to be strong. And if we're happy, help us, because being happy, we have to have gratitude, and we also thank you for being happy. We want to thank all the spiritual assistance we had today from all the spiritist centers that are with us virtually. Dear Lord, bless the Spiritist Center Love and Wisdom and all the others. So help us to be strong in continuing the dissemination of Spiritism in the USA. Thank you, and so be it. We'll see you again in July. Thank you.